Well, good afternoon. What a beautiful afternoon. Well, it's beautiful here anyway. A little bit windy, but the sun is shining, it's warm, it's brilliant. So just a quick update. Our 46th South Devon Battalion is totally done. It's based, all the basing is done. So, very pleased with that. That's all done. So they can go into storage for now, and for Eschi figures, they're quite good. Oh, as I knocked them on the floor. The only other thing I did, I hope you can still hear me. The only other thing I did was to give the flags a little bit of damage. Simply because these figures are supposed to be in a war zone. They're supposed to be on campaign. So we give the standards a bit of damage. We didn't want everything to look, brand spanking new all the time, so that's what we did, and put some patches on the trousers, etc. So that's then finished, and we swapped the musicians over. So here's the yellow musician, so that's that done, and the green musician has gone into the previous battalion. So that's that. So we're now on Italeri 95th rifles, which will make a nice change from painting red jackets and grey breeches. Paint a bit of green for a change, which would be nice. As usual, no standard bearers, so we had to take two of them, cut out the rifle and add a pole, drill out the hands very carefully and slot down a pole. So that's our standard bearers. What I thought afterwards, what I could have done, was possibly use one of those, cut out the rifle and put a pole in him, so we could have had two different standard bearers. Would have made a bit of variety, but it's too late now. So that's that. We have 3 of these in the box, which really won't fit into either battalion we'll get out of the box. We'll get 2 battalions out of this box, but I'll paint these 3 and they'll do as skirmishers out front, so we'll use them. The other thing was no musician, and you know me well enough by now to know that I like to have a musician in each battalion. So I drank a lot of tea and thought on this, and thought, how am I going to get around this? I suppose I could have used an Airfix bugler, but he's just stood bolt upright, not sort of doing anything, while blowing the bugle, but not really doing anything. And he's slightly smaller because these figures are slightly larger than an Airfix or a hat or a what other figures do we have? Well, you know what I mean. This is slightly larger. Here's a redundant British infantryman from Airfix. So you can sort of see the slight difference in size. So in the end I didn't really want to use the Airfix bugler. So in the end what I did was I took this figure cut off the rifle, made myself a bugle, believe it or not, and there you go. We have one bugler, and the bugle is, excuse me, a piece of map pin bent to shape on the horn on the end. It's just a little piece of cocktail stick. Just here's my cocktail stick here, and I've got one here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. Cut the end off. It's pointed, so cut the end off flush. Drill down the center. File it to a point. Cut off the bit you need, and just stick it on the end of the wire. And I think that makes an acceptable bugle. I think I've more or less gotten away with that one. I think when it's painted it'll look okay. So that's our musicians sorted out, our standard bearers. One or two of the figures actually I noticed there's hardly any flash on these figures, just a few mold lines, which was nice, but one or two of the figures had some sort of excess plastic between arm and body, sort of like in there, which really needed cutting away. So that took me a little bit of time to do that, but me being me, I like to get these things right, so that's the only real thing you need to do, because like I say, there's really no flash on these figures, which is good. They're a harder plastic than an Airfix or a hat or an Esche, something like that. They're a harder plastic. So whereas something like Airfix, if you get a rifle bended, it will spring back. These won't. So you have to bear that in mind. If you take a bayonet and go, it'll stay like that. So you have to be careful, because you can break them easy because they're more solid plastic. There's no give in the plastic, but I actually like the more solid plastic. It seemed to be easier to get rid of the mold lines and so forth. There didn't seem to be any issues with like the plastics were furring up like you get on a the more sort of polythene plastic figures, which was nice. I like that. And the detail on these is fabulous. I mean, compared to an Esche or something else, you know, I mean, the detail is beautiful. The only other thing I had issue was the command figure. Now, this is the command figure. Now he's sort of stood with his hand in his pocket, I mean. And this particular battalion, they're all sort of, excuse me, losing my voice, they're all sort of what I call action figures. They're all moving, they're all going somewhere. See this figure here? You know, he's moving forward. Same as this guy here. And most of them, you know, his buddy here. These are all what I call action figures. Even this guy, look. So to have the command figure stood with his hand in his pocket, it's just, I couldn't go with that. I mean, you might more or less get away with that figure for the non-action figures, like these figures here. I call these non-action figures. Alright, they're firing their rifles, but they're not actually going anywhere. They're just rooted to the spot. So that command figure, you might sort of get away with it. But even then, I'm thinking I'm probably going to modify it in some way, because it's just... the guy's not doing anything, you know. He's supposed to be in command of a load of infantry, and he stood there with his hand in his pocket. I mean, I don't see that figure at all. So, bearing that in mind, I changed my command figure, or changed part of it, to that. I gave him a complete new arm with a saber. So he's now commanding that lot of figures to go forward. So I'm a lot happier with that. The arm came off a Airfix British Hussar. And as always, when I change body parts, it's pinned and super glued and then filled around the joint and sanded. So it looks a bit odd at the moment because it's two different colour plastics. But when it's primed and painted, I'm sure it'll look fine, and it's a lot better than, at least I personally think it's a lot better than that guy there. He's just stood there, he's not doing anything. You know, he's just stood there with his hand in his pocket. I mean, I'm sure you're in the middle of a battle, you're in a war zone, you wouldn't be stood there as an officer figure, or as any figure really, you wouldn't be stood there with your hand in your pocket. I mean, so anyway, so that figure is relieved of his command, and he's demoted to the rank of private, and we've got somebody better. So that's him. So that's the 95th Rifles, plus 3 skirmishers. They've all been gone over with the Italeri tooth powder, which I have to say seems to do a good job. It seems to allow the primer to stick better to the figure. Why this is so, I don't know, but it is. So they've all had the Italeri challenge, shall we say. So it just remains now to give them all a coat of primer and then get some colour on them. So we're off and running on another battalion. That's 3 British and 3 French we've done. 6 out of 20, so we've got another 14 to go. So what I'm doing with this battalion is what I actually thought was one sort of question in my head led to another, and the end result was, I wonder how many hours it actually takes to paint a battalion of these 20mm figures. So I've got the clock on this battalion, so we're going to see how long it actually takes from cutting the figures off the whatever you call this, the spree, skeleton, whatever you call it, from cutting them off to absolutely finished. We've got the clock on it, so we'll see how long it takes. So I'm going to crack on with some primer on these figures. As always, thanks for subscribing, thanks for watching, see you on the next one.